I'll just jump right in. Mike gave us a really good intro last night at the fireside chat if you were there. I am going to talk quite a bit about Project Central. I'm first going to cover off kind of why we created it and the communication kind of breaking down as we scale and we get bigger. I'm going to jump into kind of what Project Central is, which is how Atlassian tackled this problem. Then I'm going to dive into exactly how it works, kind of what the Jira project looks like, how the microservice works in the background, and the reports and stuff that gets generated from that. And then I'll dive in a little bit the benefits we've actually seen at Atlassian. We've been running Project Central for about 4 months, and we're actually already getting a lot of good benefits from it. Generally, so as we grow and scale, we're getting a lot of teams, and they do communicate quite well within themselves. You know, we hire smart people, we hire really good developers and team players, and they communicate really good on that small scale. But what tends to happen is as the organization grows, and you end up with kind of this classic org structure, communication tends to break down when you're talking across products or across geos or into these different silos. And so what generally kind of happens is the communication that in close teams still works quite well, but you get this problem where like a team will report something up to like a dev manager, and then they create a little summary of something, and then it goes up to like a project or program manager, someone like me, or like a GM. And then that's the information that kind of gets passed over to, you know, kind of another silo or another product or another geo. But often the teams kind of down at the bottom need to get some of that information, and so they end up getting a subset because it's a summary, it's like a piece of a story. And a lot of information kind of gets lost in transit. And a lot of times it's important information, and so things get dropped. You also have a delay problem. As all this information is getting pushed out, it often gets out of date, and we were kind of noticing this at Atlassian before we implemented Project Central, and it's kind of one of the big things we really wanted to tackle. One of the key things what we really need to do is you need to flatten that communication structure, get rid of that bit of the hierarchy when we're talking about communication, and bring it back to the source of the information, which is the teams who are actually doing the work and know how things are going. And so change that structure so that it's actually that information that's getting broadcast out, not summaries of it or interpretations of it. It's the teams themselves that are generating that information and pushing it out. So what we really want to build is a communications web where each team or each stakeholder, anyone who wants to find information can actually go to a single location and source that information. And so you actually build up this little communication web where you don't have single points of failure or people that information has to pass through, but you're also sourcing that information in itself. And so anyone who needs information can actually go to a single location and source, you know, easy to find, accurate, up-to-date, and complete information. That it's being generated by the people actually doing the work, not kind of summarized or reports. So I'm going to jump in now to kind of how we tackled it at Atlassian. A little bit of background about us and kind of where we were. End of FY15, we're about a little over 1,200 employees, half of which had been at Atlassian for less than a year. And that's kind of an important thing because after you've been with the company for a year, 2 years, you really build up kind of a tribal communication network. You kind of know who to talk to in other areas. But when you're just starting out, it's really hard to kind of build up that communication network if you don't have a kind of a place to go to find things. And so with half of Atlassian having been there for less than a year, it was really hard for people to kind of know who to go talk to in another team or another geo. If like you're in Sydney and you're working with the Jira team in Saigon, it was really hard to go, who do I go talk to about this project? Because you were getting kind of a summary and working way was getting really hard. Talking about our different geographies, we actually have 12 different geos across Atlassian, every single one of them in a different time zone. Which always introduces great problems when you're working in Sydney and you're trying to coordinate something with Gdansk. Especially right now, time zones are horrible, and we don't really have any overlap in the 9 to 5 working hours. And we're doing a lot of stuff. We have over 300 active projects. I checked Project Central this morning, and we had 370 open tickets. And so there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and a lot of teams working on important things. So yeah, like I said, we were noticing that communication was just getting really difficult and transparency was getting hard. It was really hard to actually see what was going on across Atlassian. You'd ask, like a GM, hey, what's going on in DevTools? And he could go and ask people and kind of eventually get that, up and bubbled up. But it was very hard to go, okay, what are the projects we're running across every team right now? I really wanted to tackle that, so we implemented Project Central. What Project Central is, Mike touched on this a lot yesterday. It really is just a communications tool. It's not a planning tool. It's not a resourcing tool. It's not a way to track performance. It is simply designed around communication and building better communication standard channels around shared understanding and using a common language and a common process. One of the big things is Mike touched on it, the updating on a weekly basis. So every Friday, teams go in and put in their kind of weekly update on how their project is going and how it's tracking. And then we broadcast out basically a subscription-based email on Monday. So when you walk in Monday morning, you basically have the progress of anything that you're interested in kind of pushed out to you, but only the information you're interested in. So there's not an extra lot of noise in there. There's not, everything that happened in DevTools. So like Eric Whitman doesn't get a summary of all of the stuff in DevTools. He gets a summary of the 15 projects that he wants to keep an eye on right now. And so it really allows you to cut down a lot of that extra noise and just do what you're interested in and find that information and pull it out. Kind of the second big tenet is a common language, where we really wanted to boil down how we defined a project at Atlassian. So before, kind of, each team defined projects, and they kind of had this in place, but they all did it a little bit differently. One team would use slightly different terminology, especially when we got into things like how you're tracking. What is red, yellow, green? What does that mean? Each team kind of had a little bit of a different threshold. So we really went about these 6 main questions and defining exactly how we wanted to basically box up a piece of work. We call it a project. It could be a feature. It could be a classic project like rolling out a data center, but like that bit of work, and box it up and define it using the exact same language. And so here, which are the 6 questions, I'll dive through them. What are we doing? And that really is the, what are you doing? Are you building a feature? Are you, rolling out a data center? Are you running a marketing campaign? It's really just 2 to 3 sentences on the what. The second one is why are we doing it? And we really want teams to dive in and describe the customer value or the business value of that thing. Why are we doing it? Are we trying to, drive up people hooking Bitbucket and Jira together? Are we trying to, lower the onboarding time of a new user into Jira? The next one is how do we judge success? And this is an area we really wanted teams to dive in and give us quantitative goals. Which needle do you want to move? Do you want to drive up? So if the why you're doing it is to, reduce onboarding time, say I want to reduce it by 10%, and that's a really measurable goal. We didn't want people putting in goals like, yep, we shipped the feature and we didn't introduce any bugs. That's not really a goal. We really want people to dive in and go, how are you going to measure that customer value that you're trying to push out with this new feature? And so it's a way to kind of get teams to really sit down and force them to define goals and have it linked to the project. The next one is probably the biggest one we got pushback from our engineers. It's a date. When will it ship? And this isn't a hard date. We don't want it to be waterfall. We just want to be able to communicate out about when you think you're going to ship this feature. And it is very fluid. We expect most projects to run for that field to change multiple times. But getting back to the point number 1, it's really just about communicating that out to the people who are interested in it. And so we really want to get people to change that date early and often. We really want to avoid those situations where people are so worried because they put that date down and then they get 2 days from it and then it moves 2 months. As soon as you know that date's not going to work, call it out, which is kind of what the next one is, how we are tracking. That's just a red, yellow, green. Green on track, yellow at risk, red off track. And that's really specifically related to the date you stick in when you're going to ship and the value you're trying to deliver and why you're doing it. Are you going to ship this thing on this date? If the answer is definitely yes, it's green. If it's, maybe, maybe not, there's a couple of risks, that's kind of when it goes into yellow. And the team should be calling out what the risks are in the comment section on that week. And then red is off track. We try to give guidance around red. We don't want teams to kind of sit there for a long period of time. If you know you're not going to hit that date, in the next following week, you really need to make kind of that call. Am I going to slip the date and add more time? Am I going to cut scope? Or am I going to add people? And so we really want teams to call out why they're off track and then go, hey, this is how we're going to deal with it, and then move back into yellow or green in the following week because they've moved the data out or they've cut scope. The next one, central location. This was kind of a big one at Atlassian because we had all of the teams were kind of doing like status reporting and stuff in their own way in our internal Confluence instance, and things were everywhere. So it was really hard to kind of find things, and then once you found stuff, it only was live for like that project, and then as soon as something else kicked off, you had to go find another EAC link, find somebody else, get that information. And so bringing everything into a central location really, helps us increase visibility of what's going on. It's much easier to find things, and one of the things we're finding, it's also a lot easier for teams to see what other teams and other businesses are doing and prevent duplication. So a lot of times, like somebody in Confluence isn't really going to know what the Jira team in Saigon was doing, but they might have a clash because like maybe they were both trying to implement Elasticsearch or something. The last one is a common scale across Atlassian. So one of the key things with Project Central is it doesn't have like a hierarchical structure. It literally is at the team level. So like if I'm running a program, I won't have a ticket in Project Central, but all of the component teams that are doing something related to that program will have tickets. And when I say team, I mean kind of a small team, 2 to 6 engineers, maybe a team lead, that kind of scale and level. And so a chunk of work that they're working on, not like, 10 teams or something like quite big. So we bubble it down into kind of this lower level. And so that the teams actually doing the work can push the progress of it and how they're going, the statuses out, without having kind of these big summary reports. One of the big things, kind of coming back to one of our company values, open company, no bullshit. We really want this information to be honest. It's something that I kind of reiterate every time we talk about it internally is, Project Central isn't Big Brother. It's not a stick we're going to use to beat you with. We're not going to come back in your performance review and go, you slipped your project 4 times last year. And we don't want anyone who's a full-time owner to feel like they're being monitored or watched. We just want the information in Project Central to be honest. If you're going to slip a date, just slip it. It's much better to slip that date, let your dependencies know, let the stakeholders know, so you can have the conversations you need to have around, okay, maybe we can't, maybe we need to cut scope instead, but really use it as that communication tool and be honest about it and don't worry about, oh no, I have 3 projects that are red. If you have 3 projects that are red, maybe you're running too many things and we need to look at that. And we want that really to be visible and out there and people not to be worried about getting in trouble because they went red or they slipped a date. I'll dive in now to a little bit on how it works, kind of the guts around Project Central. Like I said before, it is at its heart just a Jira project. And so the nice thing is being based on Jira, we get kind of all the free wins on all the integrations that have already been built around Jira, the data being inside of the Jira database and us being able to query it and use things that already existing things like the Jira issues macro and stuff in Confluence to display a lot of the information. And so we kind of get a lot of free wins there, which is really cool. And really the only thing in each ticket are those 6 standard questions. There's no extra custom fields. We push back very heavily on anyone who wants to kind of add that or change that. We want to keep it as simple as possible. So when you create a ticket, it's very easy. It takes like 4 to 5 minutes. Everyone who's running a project should be able to answer those questions if they have a well-defined piece of work very quickly. And so we want to make it very simple so we don't get a lot of pushback in terms of, oh, it takes me 20 minutes because I had to fill out a 4-page form and there's like 35 required fields. There's only 6 fields. That the kind of people have to fill in an answer when they jump in and create a Project Central ticket. The components and labels, so we do utilize the components and labels inside of Jira. So we got kind of standard and ad hoc grouping. We use the components to define the business unit or the product that project belongs to, and it really is the team working on that project. So it's like Jira, Confluence, DevTools, HipChat, and those are the only components that are in there. So it's a relatively short list. And it is defined kind of by our business units. The ad hoc grouping is labels, and that's open to anyone who wants to stick a label on it. So a lot of the teams, like in this example, our Bitbucket server team has a label BB server, and everything they're working on has that label. So when like Nick Pella, the dev manager, wants to kind of look at what all the teams are doing and how the status is, he has a Jira issues macro that does a JQL query that pulls down everything with that label on it, and it gives you a nice little summary table on everything that's going on inside of the Bitbucket server team. And that kind of information comes in really handy. BB rebrand, so any program I'm running, I'll basically pop labels on it, and then I have a big roll-up table that has all of my programs at any one time, so I can jump on there on Mondays and see what each one is doing, which often is a lot more information than I'll get in my email digest, because I only want like 10 projects in there, not like 30. But every now and again, I need to dive in and look at the program as a whole. Kind of one of the big things is going from what I would call push communication to pull communication. Classic, reporting and bubbling stuff up. You're really pushing communication out. You're building the reports, you're deciding what's in them, and then you're kind of bubbling it up and emailing 140 people on a Friday going, here's everything that happened in DevTools. Really able to kind of flip that structure around and turn it into pull communication. So people go out and they actually subscribe to each project they want. This is done by watching the ticket. So Project Central is built on top of Jira. We have a microservice that runs in the background that sends out a weekly email. and it's built around what tickets you're watching and the dependency links inside of Jira. So if there's a dependency between two projects, it takes that into account when it kind of builds these email digests. So if like I'm a full-time owner, I'll get an email on Monday telling me how all my dependencies are tracking. So if I'm dependent on 5 projects, it'll tell me, hey, 2 of them are off track and they've slipped, a ship date by 2 weeks. And so it gives me kind of that information based upon what it's pulling out of Jira. And so those weekly emails are just customized by what projects you're watching. Already talked quite a bit about custom reports. You can build lots of things using a lot of the existing Jira issues, macros, a lot of the other Jira integrations, Jira dashboards. I generally use Jira dashboards and the Jira issues macro and Confluence to build either a custom table, or I'll use the Jira dashboards for statistical information. Like how many of the projects across Atlassian are off track. How many of them moved ship dates this week? That kind of information that just allows me to kind of see roughly how things are going. And the nice thing, because it is built on top of Jira, you can build custom integrations. And so we've actually already had an internal team do this. We have a directory system inside of Atlassian that kind of, you can jump in there and type in somebody's name, and it'll pull it up and give you all the information, what team they're working for, where they're located. They added a Project Central tab, so you can actually see the tickets that person is watching. It's kind of fun. You can jump in there and see what projects Mike and Scott are watching. See if your boss is watching your project, things like that. And it's a custom integration that somebody just went in there and said, oh, this is information that I want to know. And it's really nice because it's built on Jira and you can kind of pull that out whenever you want. This is just a quick example of that email that we send out every week that's generated by that microservice. Like I said before, it's just the tickets you're watching and any dependency you have. And it's just a summary on what happened that week. So we don't give you the whole ticket. It is just the title, whether it's red, yellow, green, the ship date, and then we highlight things like if the ship date moved, we'll highlight it. Here's an example when we highlight it, saying it's going to be delayed a week and a day. Or if somebody went and changed the what are we doing or why are we doing it, it'll kind of highlight that and say hey, something fundamental about this project has changed, and that's the only information in that email digest. If you want more information, you can click through and go to the ticket and kind of get the whole history and the whole definition of the project. But the idea is you've subscribed to it, so you kind of already know what it is, and you're only going to be interested in the updates, what happened that week, the comment that the team lead or the full-time owner put in that week. The last little bit that we kind of included at the end of that email is new projects in the last week. And this is kind of one of the nice golden things we've found has gotten a lot of benefit for us at Atlassian. In terms of raising visibility across Atlassian on what's going on and what's new. And it's not really that many, it's between 6 and 10 a week. So it's not a long list. So even at 1,200 people, there's not that much new getting kicked off. It's not like 100 new projects get kicked off every week. It's only a small handful. And what it really allows is anyone getting that information, they can see what other people at Atlassian are doing and see if something pops up that's hey, we already solved that problem. We did that last year, or, somebody else is implementing Elasticsearch, we're going to kick that off in 6 months. And so they can actually go to that person and have a conversation and skip a lot of the kind of spin-up work that they would have had to do previously. This is just a quick example of that Jira issues macro inside of Confluence. And so this is just one of the ones that I built and I use actually quite often. I just have a bunch of tabs for each one of my teams and all my programs. And this is just a summary of kind of the important stuff. And kind of the comment that they put in that week. And so I can just pop on there anytime I want and dive into those programs. I'll jump into kind of the benefits we've really seen so far at Atlassian. We've been running Project Central now for a week over 4 months, so it hasn't been a long time yet, but we've actually seen a lot of really cool benefits. I've talked about this one already kind of a few times. The better visibility really resulting in less duplication. We've had, the last time I checked, at least the ones that people have told me about, 7 or 8 instances where teams were going to implement almost the exact same thing twice, because it was the Confluence team in Sydney and the HipChat team in Austin, or the Jira team in Sydney and a team in Gdansk. And so they would, what happened is before they were kicking off that project, they'd jump into Project Central, do a quick search, and they found, oh wait, somebody had already implemented an Elasticsearch functionality. And so they were able to go and have a chat with that team, see if they could what bits of that they can reuse and get a lot of the learnings, which would, in the Elasticsearch example, it was probably 2-3 months of teamwork of a team of about 4 or 5 people. So it's actually a relatively significant savings when we're cutting down duplication of efforts across teams in different geos, just simply by raising the visibility on what's going on at that team level across all of Atlassian. This one's kind of a given, that shared language equaling a better shared understanding. A lot of times before, when teams would kind of get together and start working because they were at a dependency, there was a lot of time spent building up that shared understanding. Okay, this is how you do status tracking. What do you mean by red, yellow, green? How do you define the project? Where kind of all those lines are. So by boiling it down to kind of those 6 core questions on how we define a project, we've really kind of brought it back down and given everyone an easy way to define a project, which also helps quite a bit if you have people moving from team to team. They now know how that team's going to track things like projects because it's all the same across Atlassian, and so they kind of step in with a little bit of experience and don't have to kind of spin up as much in terms of how that specific team working, because a lot of our teams work very differently at Atlassian, and we give a lot of flexibility to our actual developers and our teams in terms of how they run things, and that it's kind of good and bad, and having a little bit of that core shared understanding and how we define projects helps quite a bit. And this last one, pull communication channels, not push, is really big in terms of cutting down a lot of the noise that gets generated when, classically, I've had it before in previous companies where, I was the project manager on Friday, I'd spend 4 hours writing reports because I'd have to go to all my teams and get summaries of stuff, and then I'd package those up into emails, and then I'd send it out to 140 people, 2 of which probably read that email. Because they were only interested in like 3 things, and I had 140 because those were all the things that I was actually getting summaries on and giving updates on. And so everyone was really interested in like 1 or 2 things. And me as a project manager, I can't send out 140 custom emails because I'd need about 50 of me. And so really turning that around and going, okay, you can actually go and decide what projects you're interested in and change that as time goes on. And then we'll build and send out those custom emails on only what you're interested in, nothing else. And so it's really allowing people who really want more information to go out and find it, but only get the stuff they wanted. And what's one of the really nice benefits too is anyone at Atlassian can actually sign up and do this. It's not kind of regulated down to just GMs or the founders or project and program managers. If a developer's like, hey, I really want to know what's happening with, HipChat rolling out a new feature, they can jump in there and watch it and get updates and see how that's going and, see the technical challenges they're handling and stuff like that. That's about it. Questions?
Yeah, we definitely have some questions, and I want to also let everyone know that we are recording this, and we're going to post it up to summit.atlassian.com within 1 to 2 business days, so I know it's a lot of content. So the first question is, you don't do resource planning in Project Central, but how does Atlassian do this?
Okay, so resource planning, a lot of it is still done at the team level. So a lot of the teams inside of a single product will do team planning, and a lot of our teams do it differently. Personally, I quite like Portfolio. Me and a lot of my teams use Jira Portfolio for doing a lot of our roadmap planning and resource planning. I personally like the benefits you get from it, and when you're in the short term and you actually have the teams working on the stories and epics and it adjusting how things are going based upon that ship date moving out or them cutting scope.
Cool. Follow-up. How does Project Central relate to Jira Portfolio?
Yeah, that's a great question. Project Central, inside of Atlassian, it's very closely tied to Jira Portfolio. So the teams that are using Jira Portfolio has kind of a breakdown. They have initiatives, epics, and stories. The initiative level inside of Jira Portfolio maps really well to a PC ticket. So when people are creating their stuff inside of Jira Portfolio, they'll have the links go out to all their epics and stories, and then that initiative inside of Portfolio will link to our Project Central ticket.
All right. Okay, so project management doesn't come naturally to dev teams, as they often work lean and focus on execution. How do you sell Project Central to them?
Yeah, that was a fun effort, trying to get all the devs at Atlassian to sign up to a thing where I'm asking them for a date and to concretely define what their projects and programs are. A lot of it was finding the stuff that Project Central was going to eliminate for them, so selling them on the value, because all the teams had to do some sort of progress tracking and communicate that out. And a lot of it was getting teams bought into, okay, there's one place I have to update my projects, and that's it. Because we had a lot of teams doing shared integration, and they'd have to update it, here when they're working with Jira, and here when they're working with Confluence, and then they had their own internal one for the team. And so really kind of selling it to them, that's like, it eliminates all of that duplication. There's a single place where people can find your stuff, so the team leads aren't getting bugged every other week by some other guy coming in and going, oh, hey, marketing needs to know how you're going. Where's that page? And so it eliminates a lot of that added noise and that added stress on a lot of our team leads and dev managers. And so getting it to selling them on that benefit and them going, okay, and then that's kind of helped them buy into it a little bit. And it's kind of a constant struggle to really getting them to understand it's a communication tool, not something we're going to beat you over the head with and get you in trouble with.
And how is Project Central different from creating a common template in Confluence?
The big thing with Project Central being based on Jira is the data's queryable. When you have like a common template inside of Confluence, you can't really query that data, and it doesn't have a traceable timeline of changes unless you kind of go through the page history. Whereas inside of Project Central, because it's based on Jira, it's very easy to find the information, and it's also trackable over time, and the data is queryable because it's inside of the Jira database. And so you can really leverage a lot of the different integrations and stuff that are built on top of Jira.
Isn't Project Central a hack? Why not create a dedicated tool?
Yeah, Project Central is a little bit of a hack, and it was what we created at the time to kind of fit the needs. We are going to continue to kind of develop and evolve it. It will almost always still be based on Jira because we get a lot of free wins for it being based on Jira, but we will probably continue to evolve it and make it more of a standalone thing. But I don't think it'll ever be a standalone tool.
And how does a person subscribe? Is there a tag or search system used?
Like I said, each ticket will have labels and components. Subscribing is literally just watching the ticket. So using the Jira Watchers functionality, so you just jump on the ticket and hit watch. And you can search for it kind of any way you can in Jira. Anything with JQLs, if you know who's running it, you can search for the full-time owner. If you kind of know what it's about, you can just do a text search, and hopefully that pops up the information. It'll pull it out of like what we're doing, and it'll give you a quick summary of that. Or if you know what team is running it, you can kind of search their label, like BB Server for our Bitbucket Server team, or BB Cloud for the Bitbucket Cloud team.
The issues within Project Central, are they associated with epics in other projects or sprints or releases? What is the connection?
So that connection really is kind of back to how we do Jira Portfolio. So it's what Jira Portfolio defines as an initiative. So it's kind of one step above an epic. So that initiative might have a number of epics. Some teams currently link their epics to their Project Central tickets, some don't. But the ones that use Portfolio kind of already have that linking built inside of Portfolio. So Portfolio will automatically create those links. If you start your planning in Portfolio and then go, create all of my tickets, it'll push them out and create all that linking for you. So a lot of teams do have their PC ticket linked to all their epics.
And what microservice do you use for the emails?
It's literally a microservice built on using Node.js. It's probably about somewhere between 800 and 1,200 lines. It's quite small. Literally all it does is it connects to the Jira REST API, pulls down every open ticket inside of Project Central, and then buckets stuff up based upon full-time owners and watchers. And so, kind of every person gets a bucket, and it scrolls through the list, and everyone who's a watcher, you get a link to that ticket, and everyone who's running a project, you kind of throw that in a bucket, and then it just generates these email reports. It's a relatively simple microservice that's built in Node.js, and just uses, I think it only queries Jira like does three JQL queries.
Okay, and sorry, we've got a lot of questions coming in. Having distributed teams, engineering in India and PO in California, what do you see as the best way of communicating and collaborating?
That's always tough when you're dealing lots of different time zones, different cultures. Like at Atlassian, we communicate a lot around Confluence pages and stuff like that, and it really depends upon what you're communicating and collaborating around. Project Central is kind of what we've come to and come up with in terms of communicating around projects and project status. Almost every single one of our teams uses Confluence to communicate and collaborate around, defining things like tech specs or, building out like customer journeys and roadmaps and stuff like that. A lot of that's done inside of Confluence in terms of that collaboration.
Cool. We're just about out of time. I want to plug another talk tomorrow called What Awesome Sauce Tastes Like. If you like what you heard about here, you're